Good morning, Millmead. My name is John Feltham, and I've been asked to say a few words about my involvement in the building project. From late 2010, I was part of the building project team with responsibility for control of the finances of the project. I took a rather cautious view about the project. I saw it as being viable, but it was a long-term commitment which would take, in my view, up to about 10 years, and it would depend upon full-hearted commitment of the entire church for that period of time. The original budget set by the church elders was £4 million. We consulted a number of professional funding advisors, and they warned us that it wouldn't be enough to rely upon monthly contributions and the odd gift day to raise that sort of money. We would need to look for external financing, largely from charitable sources, and indeed that proved the case. The project was divided into 4 distinct phases. We started by replacing the auditorium roof and then worked down a floor at the time. Once we had decided upon the firm costing for each phase, my responsibility was to assess when we had sufficient money either already received or to be received to enable us to start that phase. When we came to phase 4, we did consider splitting it into 2, but I managed to ascertain that the Baptist Union would enable us to take a much bigger loan of 1.6 million. We would use part of that to repay the outstanding on the already existing loan and use the rest to pay for the project. Now, I took the view when we entered into that loan that we had managed to receive on average about £400,000 a year towards the building project, over and above, of course, the cost of running the church at that time. And so I reasoned that provided that level of commitment remained, we would be able to pay that loan off in about 4 years. We saw examples of God's provision throughout the project. In phase 2, when we had to move the staff out of their offices, we received rent-free accommodation in Hilbury House. And in phase 4, when unexpected costs were presented to us, we received an anonymous gift of £200,000 just when we needed it. Finally, of course, we were able to start the project when we did, not knowing the pandemic was coming. We would have been very delayed otherwise.
I'd like to reinforce one of the stories that John has talked about. I can remember it very vividly. Well, he says 200,000. I recall it as 250,000, and I'll tell you why I remember that. Because I remember the morning, and I don't often do this, but I wrote down on my hand 250,000 as a prayer, and I kind of flashed it up to the Lord that morning. That very afternoon, Jill Pearson came into my office, and she said in the afternoon, she said, do you want some good news? And I said, yeah. And she said, somebody just placed anonymously £200,000 in the church building account. And it sounds very ungrateful. I said, straight away, I said, oh, so where's the other 50,000? And she choked. She said, what do you mean? But that was just an astonishing moment of God's provision. The other one I remember, which I'd like to share also, is the chapel. And I think we totted up, it was going to come in at about £50,000. And I don't know if I'd mentioned it. One night I went home Sunday evening after the evening service, and I opened my inbox, and there was an email there from a couple who at the time were coming along. They weren't members of the church. I've not really ever seen them since. I've lost touch with them. We're talking. We heard about this vision for this chapel. We really think this is important, and we would like to make a donation. Well, they paid for it outright in one go. You can imagine I slept very well that night, and I thought, how amazing. And it was, for me, like a lot of these things, as I know you will all have experienced, it was just so confirmatory, I think that's the word, affirming that God was involved and that we could trust him fully for every stage of the process. What has happened here is that we've had years and years of you all and others who have moved on, some have passed away, astonishing generosity and commitment. And to see now what's happened in the building, in the community, is an ongoing story as to how these spaces have enabled us to open up and how we've journeyed with that over the years. I've counted a great privilege to have been part of all of that story.
Hello, my name is Bar. Guildford Baptist Church has been my spiritual home for the last 54 years. Since then I've worked on various aspects of the church, but latterly I've been much more involved with people of my own generation, helping with the hymn sing-along, the tea party, the prayer meeting and the holiday at home. But of course over the last 10 years I've also been making lots of cards and selling them on Sunday morning. It's been a teamwork really. It was very easy to write my name on a piece of paper that actually said that I would make a standing order. But having done it, it just didn't seem to be quite enough. Over the last 10 years, we've collected about £12,000 and we've made nearly 10,000 cards. But other people have come on board. When I first saw the new building, I was really amazed at how light it was. It was so light, so welcoming, and it felt a really warm and safe place to be. And I just thank God that over the years, He's blessed us with such a facility that we can use as a Christian family, but that we can also share with the community around us.
Hello, I'm Arthur Childs. Mary and I have been in Millmead now for 30 years, and I'm currently the finance deacon. In my work, I'm a financial advisor. We borrowed as a church a large amount of money from the Baptist Union to finish off the building project. We felt this was the right thing to do, and looking back, because of COVID and lockdown, it was exactly the right thing to do. And in March 2021, the elders asked me to take on the role of Building Loan Repayment Champion. Thankfully, I never got to use the title. The idea was they wanted to repay the building loan in 3 or 4 years. I prayed about this a lot because we were looking at raising almost £500,000 a year. And the church was already generously giving to the general funds, which were quite large. And so, as I said, I prayed. I asked 2 of the groups in the church to pray and gave them updates. The Lord led me particularly to a passage in 2 Kings chapter 4. And it was about Elisha and a woman who had a large debt. So this seemed very appropriate. And he said to her, "What do you have in your house?" And she said, "Well, nothing really, just a drop of oil in a jar." The message really I felt for the church was that what we have in our homes already is sufficient to repay this large loan. I used those jars to illustrate to people at church meetings how God would fill those jars for us. And so there were 5 jars. One was, general giving, one was lump sum giving, one was gift aid from HMRC, and so on. And I would show the church how these jars gradually filled up. And we did this each year, and each year God was very gracious, and we got very near our target every year. And also what we did, we had events, and there were so many people in the church. You've heard from Bar, people who opened their homes for special meals. There were concerts. We had lots of things going on. I remember that Rob Case Green and Abe, they actually got calls, they got together and they lost weight and raised a huge amount of money. So lots of things like that going on. And really, God was very good because we did raise the money from what was in people's homes, what they had among them. We got a little bit of help from 1 or 2 outside companies, organisations, but it wasn't very much and it didn't make any difference in the end. I just feel that God, everything we need for the church in terms of future problems that we will have financially, they're in the Bible. And as individuals too, I just feel that when we have issues, we need to read the Bible, look at the stories, and we need to learn from the principles that are there.
Hi, I'm Abby, the youth worker here at Millmead. The building project has been such an incredible thing to see since I've been here. When I first came in 2016, the games hall was still one tall ceiling. And these meeting rooms have been so valuable to us. Not just the hub where we've hosted youth work for years, but one thing I remember from the building project was the youth work we were able to do after the COVID lockdowns. You might remember back in 2020, 2021, we were able to eventually come into the building and use the meeting rooms as studios to create the Family Zone and Millmead Youth Online, things that we were still able to do after many months online on Zoom, but then we were able to create this interactive resource. But after that, once the engagement was starting to get really hard for the young people, we created some events here in the building, because the young people were one of the first groups to legally be allowed to come together as larger groups with less restrictions. So we embraced that, and we used our meeting rooms and all around the new auditorium everywhere to play a big game of Among Us, which was a game we played online together for so long during the lockdowns. And that just created really good memories and gave them an opportunity to come together as young people. And I know for the children, just to start building those social interactions again. You know, the amount of events we've been able to host, Night of Light, the holiday clubs and other outreach events that have been just so valuable, and we've really loved having the spaces we've been blessed with in this building. And since lockdown, we've just been able to do so much. The amount of young people that have been able to serve in the cafe and to develop those social work skills. We've mentored loads of young people in the cafe as well, because it's such a safe and inviting environment. Hang out and just be young people. And we've baptised loads of young people in newly refreshed baptism pool, which is amazing. They didn't get their slide from the hub down into the baptist pool, but you know, I think they're okay with that, because there's so much else that they've been able to do with this building. And even though we can't meet here at the moment, because we've got the awful problem of having too many young people that we can't fit in the building on a Sunday, I just know that they love this building. They love how safe they feel in here and how welcome they are into this church. And you just have to see the amount of young people and children happily coming around this church for different things, to see just what a valuable place this is for them, and to nurture their growth and their spirituality. And I just look forward to the future to see how much more we could use this amazing building for the future of the children and youth work.